A long time ago, in a village called Akali, lived a young man named Emeka. Akali was a village of farmers and hunters. In Akali, every man was supposed to farm, fish or hunt to provide food for their household. Emeka wasn't good at any of these activities. His father, a successful farmer, had left him with several acres of land. But no matter how hard he worked on his farm, he could barely get enough food to feed his wife, Uzo, and their daughter, Ada. The men of Akali were famed for their robust build and masculinity. They prided themselves on being blue-collar workers who were good providers for their family. But Emeka had always been different. He was slightly built and of a sensitive disposition. His unusually fair skin meant that too much time in the sun left him sunburnt, and he just seemed too frail for manual labor. Worst of all, he had a sickness that meant any slight dust would send him coughing and gasping for breath. The villagers labeled him as lazy, and no matter how much he tried to explain his struggles, they would not listen. What Emeka liked more than anything was to play his traditional flute. He would work for a few minutes, find somewhere under the shade, and play melodious tunes for the rest of the day. Despite the fact that he was not a good provider, Uzo loved Emeka dearly. She knew he was trying his best and managed whatever meager returns he brought from the farm. It's not his fault that he burns so easily and tires so quickly, she would tell others. Emeka's neighbor, Chidi, was the opposite. He was a brash, muscular man, with arms and legs like an Iroko tree and the energy of 3 men. He would get up at 5 a.m. in the morning and work non-stop until evening, and repeat the next day. His farm was the biggest and most bountiful in Akali. His barns were always full of yam and other foodstuffs. Because of this, he was well respected, and even though young, he already had 2 wives and was looking to add more. Chidi and Emeka grew up knowing each other as their fathers' farms bordered each other. Chidi had always bullied Emeka. He mocked his frail features. He mocked the fact that he played the flute. He mocked the fact he could not stay an hour in the hot sun without getting burnt. Emeka had always been scared of Chidi, for he was big, burly, and not scared of putting his hands on smaller boys. "See him," he would say to his friends, "like a woman, spending all day blowing into a stick while his wife and daughter starve." They would all laugh. Emeka knew people made fun of him, and it upset him. He would wake up determined to get a good day of work on his farm. But after a few minutes, he would start gasping for breath, and his skin would be on fire. Soon, he would be under a tree, composing a tune on his flute. One day, Uzo went over to Chidi's house and asked for some yams. She hated begging, but her daughter was hungry, and Chidi always had yam to spare. Chidi handed her a tubia of yam, but then grabbed her wrist. "You deserve better than that stick blower. I only have 2 wives. Become the 3rd, and see how a real man takes care of his family." Uzo jerked her hand away, repulsed by Chidi's advances. Chidi was a very handsome man, but he was brutish, crude, and arrogant. "Mind yourself, Chidi. I am married," Chidi scoffed. "Married to a man that starves you. When hunger has finished you and your daughter, you will come to me on your own." He laughed as Uzo hurried away in tears. "Where did you get the yam from?" Emeka asked her suspiciously. "I got it from my sister," Uzo replied, and quickly began preparing dinner. Emeka fell silent. He felt he was failing as a man. He was in a village where everything was measured by how much yam you had in your barn, and his barn was often bare. The next day, all the men in the village went to their farms, but Emeka, too sad to work, went on a walk into the bush to clear his head. He went deeper in the forest than he had ever gone, playing a sad tune on his flute. On and on he walked, daydreaming, until he realized with a shock that he was lost. He turned back, trying to retrace his steps, but soon realized he was walking in circles. I am so useless, he thought dejectedly. I can neither farm nor hunt or fish. Imagine getting lost in the bush like a child. He wandered about, trying to get his bearings, but he was hopelessly lost, and soon it was nighttime. He decided he would spend the night in the forest. He would try to find his way home in the morning. He brought out his flute and started playing. He played a new song, a particularly melodious song that he had recently composed. What Emeka did not know was that he was in an enchanted part of the forest, full of spirits, gnomes, changelings, and other creatures. As he played, lost in his own world, they all gathered, drawn out by the beautiful melody coming from the human. They all started dancing. One spirit in particular danced the hardest. Kukada was a forest spirit that was almost 8 feet tall, with eyes like saucers and a mouth that had 64 teeth. The raffia grass skirt he wore swayed as he danced excitedly. He had never heard anything so rhythmic. Suddenly, Emeka realized he wasn't alone and turned to see several strange, terrible-looking creatures. He fell on the floor, begging for mercy, realizing in alarm that he had strayed into an enchanted forest. Kukada spoke. "Normally, I will have you for dinner, son of man." His voice was like a booming echo. "But what wonderful melodies and rhythms you play!" The other creatures murmured in agreement. "Best thing we ever heard." They chorused in unison. "Do not be afraid, human. Get up and play some more. I have my dancing shoes on," Kukada said. Trembling, Emeka put the flute to his lips and played. This time, it was a fast tempo number, and Kukada danced and swayed so rhythmically it would shame the best human dancer. "Don't you dare stop," Kukada said as Emeka paused for breath. So Emeka kept on playing until it was almost dawn and he was gasping for air. "Please, Mr. Forest Creatures, Honorable Kukada, I am tired. Perhaps I can come back and play some other time, but I have to go to my farm as it is almost dawn. My family is hungry and will be expecting me." They all groaned. They didn't want Emeka to stop playing. "Farm? How long will you be there?" Kukada asked. "Unfortunately, I have to clear a big expanse of land, and it will take me all week. I can be available to play for you in 7 days." The forest creatures all groaned in disapproval. 7 days? That's too long. How large is this farm? Emeka explained that it was several acres. Kukada scoffed. "You will come back tomorrow. Go home now, and we will see you this time tomorrow for a forest concert." Emeka left hurriedly, and strangely enough, he soon found his way back home in no time. He went straight to his farm and tried to do some work, but as usual, he started gasping for breath. Dejectedly, he went home. He would try again the next morning. The next morning, he went to his farm, and to his astonishment, it was all cleared. His farm was very large, and it would take 5 men weeks to clear, but this work had been done overnight. Kukada, he thought. He must have done it. Quickly, he entered the bush, and soon he was in the enchanted forest. As soon as night came, he started playing. Soon, Kukada and the other creatures came out, swaying and dancing in delight. "Did I do good work on your farm?" Kukada said as he danced. For a big spirit, he could move very well. "Thank you so much. That is why I came to show my appreciation. Listen to this tune I have just composed." Emeka blew his flute, and the spirits danced, moving their waists and clapping in glee, for they had never heard anything so beautiful. Soon, however, Emeka grew tired and stopped. The creatures groaned. "What now, son of man? The party has just started." Emeka was exhausted. He explained to Kukada that he had to plant yam and needed to conserve his energy. Kukada frowned. Yams? How long will that take? A month, Emeka replied. Well, it takes normal people shorter, but I am weaker than normal men. Kukada scoffed. Go home and come back tomorrow. I will work on the farm overnight. The next morning, Chidi, who was Emeka's neighbor, rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Emeka's farm had been a bush just a few days ago, but now it was not only cleared, the ground had been plowed and yams were sprouting here and there. He hurried to Emeka, who was playing on his flute underneath the shade of a leafy tree. What sorcery is this, Emeka? He bellowed. Emeka smiled and feigned ignorance. What do you mean? You know very well what I mean. Just a few days ago, this was a complete bush. Now there's more yam on your farm than mine. Do you have people working for you? Emeka laughed. I have been working hard day and night. Chidi opened and shut his mouth, speechless. Finally, he stormed off, leaving a laughing Emeka. Soon, Emeka, with Kudaka's help, overtook Chidi as the most successful farmer in Akali. His farm produced the biggest and best yam. His barn was overflowing with gargantuan yam tubers, and his pockets full as he sold surplus to villagers. Every other evening, he would go into the enchanted forests and perform for the forest creatures, and overnight, Kukada would work on his farm. There was no job big enough for Kukada. It was better than having an army of farm workers. Soon, Emeka bought more land all around Akali and produced more yam than all the other farmers combined. He began planting other crops as well: tomato, cocoyam, corn, mangoes, pawpaws, you name it. He had so much he started giving out food. This was the last straw for a seething Chidi. His ego was already bruised by being usurped as the biggest farmer in Akali. He was not going to let Emeka spoil his business. He went to see Emeka. Do you not know that by giving out yam, you are driving the price down? He demanded. Emeka was stunned. But I cannot sell to the poor, he said. I am only trying to be a good person. Chidi was enraged. You are killing my business. Stop it! Emeka, seeing the telltale signs of aggression on Chidi's face, apologized. I meant no harm. I will only give the poorest villagers, he said. Chidi loomed over Emeka. He was a large and powerful man, and Emeka cowered away from him. Many times when they were younger, Chidi had dragged him into a bush and given him a good beating. They were men now, but he was still terrified of Chidi. I don't know what kind of witchcraft you are using, but I am unimpressed. You might be the flavor of the month now, but to me, you will always remain Emeka, the loser that blows hot air into sticks. Perhaps Emeka should just have stopped giving away food, but his generous nature made it impossible for him to refuse anyone that came begging. He kept on giving anyone who asked free food, and unknowingly to him, he was making a powerful enemy. Chidi was stewing. First, Emeka had become the richest man in Akali, and to add insult to injury, he was driving yam prices down, taking money from his pocket. This was the same Emeka who could not work in the sun for a few minutes before turning red like an overripe tomato. Come to think of it, although their farms were side by side, he had never seen Emeka working on his farm. Something was fishy, and he would get to the bottom of it. He was always wandering into the forest, Chidi thought. I will follow him tomorrow. The next day, Chidi followed Emeka as he entered the bush. Emeka played his flute, unaware that he was being shadowed. He got to the enchanted forest and waited for nightfall. At the allotted time, he started playing, and Chidi, who was hiding in a large bush, almost exclaimed aloud as the forest creatures came out, dancing in the moonlight. They danced all night, and as usual, they complained bitterly when Emeka was done. "Tomorrow as usual?" Kukada asked. "Yes, I will need help with my farms. The cocoyams and corn are ready for harvest." Kukada scoffed. "Have I not been the one helping you from day one? Wasn't your farm all bush just a few months ago? As long as you continue to play for us, I will work on your farm. They will be harvested and packed neatly for you by dawn." When they had all gone home, Chidi came out of hiding, an evil smile on his face. So this was Emeka's secret. He had evil creatures on his payroll. He punched the air triumphantly. "Emeka, your days are numbered." That night, Chidi confronted Emeka. He told him that he had followed him into the enchanted forest and he had seen him play for the forest creatures. "That is how you gain an unfair advantage over me. You recruit that forest beast, Kukada, to work on your farm. Forest beast, Kukada, to work on your farm." Emeka was stunned. He could only look at Chidi stupefied. But I didn't mean to gain an advantage. It all happened by accident." Chidi snorted. He was a natural bully and had intimidated Emeka all his life. "If you do not do exactly as I say, I will tell the whole village that you are nothing but a wizard, and the food you give for free is prepared by demons. I will make sure you are finished in this village." Emeka was so scared at the anger he saw in Chidi's face, he could only nod tearfully. "Tomorrow evening, you and I are going back to that forest and you will do exactly what I say." The next evening, Emeka started playing while Chidi watched, hidden away in the bushes. Kukada, as usual, asked what Emeka wanted done on his farm. "I want you to do some work on my neighbor's farm, Chidi," Emeka said. Kukada nodded. "Of course, that will be no problem. But we have a festival of forest creatures in a week. We will need you to play the whole day." Emeka nodded sadly. The next morning, Chidi hurried to his farm and gave a whoop of delight. Kukada had done the work of 30 men. He had cleared the farm, plowed the fields, and planted yam, cocoyam, and maize. If Chidi had divided himself into 100, he couldn't have done a better job. From then on, Chidi made sure Kukada only worked on his farms. He bought several acres all over town, and quickly they all became profitable. After a while, Emeka begged Chidi for them to stop going to the enchanted forest. Chidi was by now not only the biggest farmer in the village, but one of the biggest in the entire country. "Let's stop going to Kukada, Chidi," Emeka begged. "You are the biggest and wealthiest farmer and you no longer need him. I am tired of playing for the forest creatures." Chidi would not agree. He had become drunk on his success and had great plans. "We will go for a little while longer. The next time, you will ask him to go to my biggest competitors' farms in Akali and neighboring villages. I want him to destroy their crops." Emeka could not believe his ears. It was one thing to ask Kukada to help with his farms, quite another to sabotage other people's farms. "I can't do that," Emeka said, his voice shaking. "You had better do what I say if you or your family wants any peace in Akali." Emeka's face fell. He wished he could stand up to Chidi, but something about him had always frightened him. Now, thanks to him, Chidi had become the most powerful man in the village, and he was vindictive enough to carry out his threat. The next time they were in the enchanted forest, he gave Kukada Chidi's instructions. Even Kukada was shocked. "You want me to destroy the farms of people in Akali and other villages? Are you sure?" Emeka, aware Chidi was watching him, nodded sadly. "Yes, if you want me to continue playing for you," he said softly. There was much moaning and groaning the next day, as farmers all over Akali and 4 surrounding villages woke up to see their farms destroyed. Yam tubers had spoiled overnight, locusts had devoured maize, and the cassava had been uprooted and squashed. What could have happened, they all thought, and how come Chidi's farms were spared? They called an emergency meeting. Nobody had an answer for what had transpired until Chidi spoke. As you can see, my farm was spared from this calamity, he said gravely. This is because I took time to sacrifice to the deity of the land. If you want me to intercede for you, you will have to make me the king of Akali. There was outrage. Akali was a true democracy. All men had an equal say. There had never been a king, and there would never be one, the elders told Emeka. Emeka got up angrily and left. That night, he went straight to Chidi, raging. I will show these old fools. I will unleash Kukada on them. He was true to his word. For months, Kukada went from farm to farm, ravaging yam, destroying maize, and making sure nothing grew. Despite the best efforts of the farmers in the Akali and the 4 neighboring villages, they were not able to grow anything. After a while, the elders were forced to concede and made Chidi the first king of the 5 villages. He rewarded the elders that crowned him with titles and land, while keeping the most fertile for himself. Chidi was a terrible king. He owned all the choice lands and created a feudal system whereby the former landowners worked for him for a pittance. He was a tyrant, and because he had so much of a monopoly, he was finally able to set the prices of yam and other foodstuffs as high as he wanted. He became incredibly wealthy and powerful. A silver lining for Emeka was that he was finally free from playing for the forest creatures. Chidi had stopped forcing him to go to the enchanted forest. There was no longer any use for Kukada, as Chidi had an army of workers that he forced to do his bidding. Emeka stopped playing the flute altogether, as he could not bear the thought that it was because of him that Akali's citizens knew so much suffering and pain. For the longest time, he would cry himself to sleep, ashamed he had been unable to stand up to Chidi. The years went by, and Chidi only became more powerful and despotic. With the help of his council of chiefs, he ruled the 5 kingdoms with an iron hand, and all the villagers were petrified of him as he allowed for no dissent. One night, a melody so beautiful floated to Emeka in his dreams. Puzzled, he followed the sound into the moonlit night, where he found his daughter playing his flute. "What do you think you're doing? Who taught you that?" Emeka asked, startled. Ada looked frightened. "I'm sorry, father. I have been practicing. I hope you don't mind." Emeka's face softened. He could never stay mad at his beautiful daughter. "Women are not supposed to play the flute," he told her. He frowned. She was already very good and just needed a little fine-tuning. Unable to resist, he asked her to play some more and started giving her lessons. This became a nightly ritual, and soon Ada was much better than he had ever been. She possessed a natural flair that he had never had. Her slim fingers would work themselves around the tiny flute finger holes, and the most remarkable sound would emanate from the instruments. She grew so adept, she was able to communicate language using the flute. "Why did you stop playing, father?" she asked one day. Emeka bit his lip in regret. Tearfully, he told her the story of how he had started playing for forest creatures, how he had made a fortune through Kukada's hard work, and how he had lost it all. Ada could not believe her ears. She loved her father with all her heart, but they were so different. Ada, you see, was a beautiful, brave, and strong-willed girl. She never would have allowed herself to be bullied by King Chidi. The more she thought about the story, the angrier she got. King Chidi was a most wicked and greedy man. The realization that his wealth was mostly ill-gotten made her shake, and she resolved to do something about it. One night, she entered the bush and made her way to the enchanted forest. She steeled herself and settled on the same log her father had played on many years before. Then she started playing, her heart hammering in her chest. Truly, she was now many times better than her father, and the tune she played was so melodious, so rich. Kudaka soon appeared, snapping his finger and moving his head to the beat in delight. "Ha!" Kudaka said in a booming voice. "This reminds me of the good old days." All the forest creatures were out by now, dancing and laughing as the strange young female serenaded them with beautiful music. After a short while, Ada stopped and yawned. The forest creatures protested loudly. "Play a little bit more," they chorused. "I wish I could, but I have so much work to do tonight." Ada wasn't tired at all. She had a cunning plan. Kukada, as usual, asked what the work was, and when he heard, he snorted. "If that's all, I can do all that in 5 minutes. Play a bit more, and then you can go and get some rest, for we would love to have you back in a few days." That night, Kukada did Ada's bidding. He went to the village of Akali and found the biggest farm there. He uprooted hundreds of yam tubers and stomped on them. Then he turned on the maize and vomited out thousands of locusts from his huge mouth. The insects got to work and devoured all the maize plants. Finally, he turned to the mango trees and farted in their direction. The mangoes immediately started rotting, and soon maggots emerged from them. He surveyed his handiwork in satisfaction and grunted. The human flute player should be pleased, he thought. The next morning, King Chidi surveyed his farm in horror. Overnight, his biggest farm had been destroyed. The king's guards and advisors were stunned as they viewed the devastation. What could have caused such a thing to happen? They watched as their king turned wordlessly and returned to his palace. King Chidi guessed quite correctly that the only thing that could have caused such devastation was Kukada. The question now was why. He gave a harsh command, and soon Emeka was brought before him. Emeka looked at the king in fright. Chidi was bad enough as a commoner. As a king, he was downright evil. "Did you put Kukada up to this?" Chidi asked angrily. "Up to what, sire?" Chidi got up, unable to keep his temper. "My biggest farm has been utterly destroyed. Years of work gone to waste. Only Kukada could have done this." Emeka pleaded. He had not played his flute in years and never went into the forest. It wasn't his doing. "My lord, I do not even have the breath to blow out a candle, never mind a flute. My lips have not touched one in years. Look at me. I am an old, frail, weak man who can barely stand up straight." "Liar!" Chidi roared. "This is your chance for revenge for what I did to you." He called his guards and ordered them to lock Emeka up. "Let's see how you summon Kukada from a jail cell," he shouted. The next day, King Chidi surveyed his second biggest farm in horror. Not a single tuber of yam was edible. No grain of maize escaped the horde of locusts, and all his mangoes were riddled with mangoes. King Chidi was puzzled. It could not have been Emeka, for he was locked away safely in prison. He ordered guards to stand watch at all his farms, all over the 5 kingdoms. Despite the guards, Kukada could not be denied. He would blow a mist into the air, and soon all the king's guards would be asleep, leaving him to do as he pleased. One by one, the king's farm was destroyed until only a handful of farms remained. In desperation, King Chidi hatched a plan. He knew this was Kukada's doing, and he could only think of one way to stop him. He sent out messengers far and wide, advertising a competition to find the best flautist in the 5 kingdoms. The winner was to get a very handsome reward. The rich reward attracted the best flute players far and wide. One by one, they played for the king, but he was dissatisfied. He didn't want a good flautist. He needed an extraordinary one who could play like Emeka could do many years ago. Angrily, he dismissed the competitors and berated the planners. "What is this rubbish that assails my ears?" he shouted angrily. "Get me someone that can play a tune that will astonish the angels and make both living and non-living things get up and dance." Another competition was organized, and again, it was a flop. King Chidi was livid. If he did not do something soon, all his farms would be destroyed, and the villagers would surely rise up against him. On the 3rd competition day, a beautiful young girl stood up to play. The villagers snickered, as they had never seen a female flautist. King Chidi looked on from the stage. A girl, he thought. What could a girl do? He hadn't seen Ada in a long time and did not recognize her. Ada brought the flute to her mouth, and her slim, delicate fingers flickered up and down the instrument and started playing. The tune she played was by far the most melodic anyone in the village had ever heard. Soon, they were all on their feet, dancing. Even the grumpy King Chidi found his foot tapping the floor to the rhythm created by the female flautist. Finally, he thought in relief. This was by far the most talented flautist he had ever heard, even better than that old fool, Emeka, he thought. That very evening, King Chidi, along with 2 of his guards, and Ada, entered the bush. Soon, they were in the enchanted forest. "Okay, little girl," he barked, "I want you to play your best tune, and if you fail in this task, know that this is your last night amongst the living." Ada nodded. "Remember what I told you to tell the spirits?" Chidi shouted. Ada nodded again. Ada brought the flute to her lips, but instead of playing a stirring melody as she normally did, she played a tragic tune. The tune told a story that only spirit ears could hear and understand. She reported King Chidi to Kudaka. She told him how she was the flautist, Emeka's daughter, how King Chidi had bullied Emeka and the village, how King Chidi was now at this very moment blackmailing her. Chidi frowned in hiding. Something was wrong, but all he heard was a sad song. His human ears couldn't interpret it. "Ha!" he thought. "Here comes Kudada." Kukada and the rest of the forest creatures emerged, but this time they didn't dance. They all listened to the flautist girl tell her tale. Some gasped, some had tears in their eyes. Kukada was outraged at the wickedness of King Chidi. "He's in the bushes," Ada said through her flute. "Arrest him and enslave him forever, and I will play for you any time you desire." Kukada roared and pounced on King Chidi. His guards didn't wait to see what would happen. They fled. "So you evil human," Kukada roared. "You bully father, and now you bully daughter?" King Chidi pleaded for mercy, but it was no use. "You will spend the rest of your days here, with me as a servant. For every time I have worked on your wretched farm, you will work on mine." That night, Kukada went back to the 5 kingdoms and worked on their farms. He worked hard as instructed by Ada. He planted yams, cocoyams, mangoes, and other crops. He did this diligently for months, and soon all the farms were back in business. The farmers reclaimed their lands, and the villagers, taking advantage of Chidi's absence, returned Akali to a democracy. Soon order was restored. Emeka was released from prison and was reunited with his family. Up until the present day, his descendants, all talented flutists, would go into the forest for a ceremony, playing for Kukada, the forest deity that had liberated Akali from wicked King Chidi. Of course, Kukada would not come out any longer, as the forest was no longer enchanted. But the tradition persisted until nobody remembered why it was done in the first place. And that, my dear viewers, is the end of the story. If you enjoyed it, kindly like, share, and subscribe. Your comments are always welcome, so feel free to tell us what we got right and also what can be improved. Goodbye, until next time.